So you want to shoot Appendix in competition. In this video, I go over my Appendix setup. Over the years, Appendix carry has become more popular, and interestingly enough, IDPA has laxed up on their rule set to allow Appendix carry now that you can shoot in competition. And so I've actually been playing around with some various setups and doing it casually for fun. Now, I know that you guys are going to have different ways and approaches of how you do your setup, but I'm just going to review mine. So I do want to hear how you do your setup. So if you have a different setup or anything like that, please sound off in the comments below. Now, why would you consider doing this for competition? One of the big reasons for doing this is because this is about as close as you'll get to using your everyday carry without, God forbid, the real situation. And when you're under the clock, it adds just that touch of element of just a little bit of duress. So you get to see a handful of things. You get to see how well your equipment is set up and how you move in and out of position. Now, interestingly enough, you can also see what clothing works. So you may find that a tight t-shirt doesn't work, or you may play around with how you place equipment or decide what you're going to carry in general. I know when I started this out, I tried to do this with two and it didn't quite work for me because of my body type. This is gonna be an interesting talk because Appendix carry is different for almost everybody out there, whether it's your size, your body type, whatever it may be. And to give you reference, I'm 6'2", about 250 pounds, so I'm a pretty big dude. And so I have to think about this a little differently, and some things that might be comfortable for really skinny dudes may be uncomfortable for me. So this experimentation in this is where you can find this out in a safe setting. And most notably, now you don't have to play with the tactical fishing vest. So let's kind of look at maybe some of the potential drawbacks. Well, you are adding additional movement for it, and the less movement you have in competition, the better. But for the sake of keeping on topic of, hey, I want to get better with my everyday carry, you still got to think about several things. You've got to access it, you got to access your firearm, you still got to be able to access your mag with just this one hand. At least that's how I do it. So at least for the competition's sake, there is kind of a drawback for that. I know for me that I lose about a half a second to a second with this current setup. Now I know if I practice that with time, I could get used to it and probably be on par or pretty close to what my actual competition setup is. And one of the other drawbacks particularly is that it's not quite as comfortable as carrying it on the hips. And I notice that whenever I have to bend down or grab something, it's particularly not comfortable. You know, if you're out carrying it in the real world, that, you know, it's going to be interesting in that sense. So know that this is particularly my competition setup, and I'll also have my everyday carry setup too, so we can go over that. All right, we're gonna hop into my actual equipment now. So before I do that, I ask if you like this video, please hit that like button, as that helps me a lot. And you're gonna wanna subscribe because I'm gonna come out with other content as well on this, and you can also see me shoot this more in competition, so you're gonna wanna subscribe. All right, so diving into my actual setup. Well, I'm gonna just pull this back right here. I'm gonna draw my gun, and it's unloaded, of course. But this is my actual IDPA competition gun, which is a Masterpiece Arms DS9, the IDPA compliant version for this. It's a full 5-inch gun, and it comes in at a hefty 43 ounces for a competition weight. And if you want more information specifically on my gun, I have reviews on this gun and also how it behaves in IDPA. So you can check that out. But for the purpose of this video, I just want to focus on the setup. And so the biggest thing that you need to pay attention to is the belt. And the reason why I say that is it's got to be very, very sturdy, because if it's floppy, it's going to make a mess when you draw, and it's going to cause binding both in either your mags or when you go to draw your actual gun. And I've used this same belt for 3 years, both in my IDPA competitions and as well as my everyday carry, and it's a Blade Tech Ultimate Carry belt. And it's just been sturdy and solid throughout the years. It's the ratcheting type, so you can pull it in and out and adjust it to actually what you need, especially when you start to play around with gear and where you want to place that. You need some flexibility there versus the traditional 1-inch hole spacing. So let's talk my holster now. Now I'm using a QVO tactical holster, which is the discreet model. Now they have another model called the more discreet, which includes a claw. And the reason why I originally ordered that is because I had this theory that if I didn't have a claw in it, it would stick my handle out more like that, making it easier to grab the gun. Well, yeah, it kind of does do that. The challenge with that is when you go to lift your shirt up, I kid you not, guys, without fail, every time it would snag right underneath the grip right here, and I'd have to pull this up even harder, slowing down my draw. So I ended up putting a claw back into it to eliminate that issue, and with a little bit of dry fire and practice, I can get back right into it. All right, so next I'll talk about mag pouches. Because if you see here, these are dry fire mags, so they're going to be a little bit taller than my actual IDPA mags, so they do stick out. But you'll see that I have one in here, and all I did was take my original contact pouch and just reversed it and put it on the inside here. And I actually loosened this up quite a bit because when my body compresses against it, it adds a layer of compression. And as a result of that, I end up being able to access it fairly easy and not even having to think about it. The other pouch I want to talk about is my second pouch. Now this one is, if you can see, it's sitting in my pocket, but I'm actually using what's called a reload wrap. And it's a very simple little tool that just pins anywhere you want. You can put this on your belt, you can put it in your pocket, and you can make it fully adjustable so it sits in there a little bit lower. But I actually like this setup because whether I wear a vest or not, when I'm doing attack reload, I always go to this pocket. That's just what works for me. So when I do attack reload, I can end up coming to here pretty easily and pulling this mag up. Now I've got on my other everyday carry setup, which is for my Staccato P. Now the difference with this is that I'm using a Vetter side tuck holster, which entails that you have the holster and the mag pouch integrated as one unit. And it's great because it does flex around my body. And for competition particularly, it's a little bit more comfortable to carry than my full-size setup. So this is probably my most practical setup, and shooting competition with it doesn't really slow me down at all because it's still very easy to access and manipulate as I need to. So this is just a very simple setup that I keep, and for the competition's sake, I still do run the reload wrap in my pocket. Now the question you might be thinking is, well, why don't I have that set up for my competition setup? Well, the challenge I have with that is I cannot find a holster manufacturer, or at least one that I find suitable. The challenge I have though is when you have a full-size 5-inch gun with a full-length dust cover on it, there's not very many options for, particularly this type of setup for carry. Now, if you have a recommendation on that, I would love to hear about that, and just sound off in the comments below if you do have one. Here's what I want to say about all this, guys. If you're one of those individuals that says, look, I can live without doing the competition, but I would love to get relevant training, you do have options for that. And that's what I wanted to illustrate in this video. So if you're carrying your Glock 26 or you're carrying a Staccato P like I like to, guys, get out there, take your gear to the range and go and practice with your equipment. Don't let that be a barrier to coming to a match and worrying about the competition element. You're there to get better just in case if you have to access this for that emergency situation. What better place than competition? And so with that said, we will see you at the range.